At the dawn of the 20th century, the Russian Empire was a colossal power ruled by an absolute monarch, Tsar Nicholas II. But behind the glittering facade of the Romanov court, a dark and mystical force was taking root. He was a peasant, a supposed holy man with hypnotic, piercing eyes and a scandalous reputation. He held no official title, yet he could make or break government ministers with a single whisper. He was not a general, but his influence would help lead an empire into a catastrophic war. He was Grigori Rasputin, the Mad Monk. This is not just the story of a man, it is the code behind how a single, charismatic charlatan hacked the heart of an empire and helped bring it crashing down. His story begins in a remote, frozen village in Siberia. Born in 1869, Grigori Rasputin was a peasant with no formal education. He was known for his wild, debauched behavior as a youth, but also for a strange, magnetic intensity. After a religious pilgrimage, he emerged as a starets, a self-proclaimed holy wanderer, a mystic who claimed to have the power to heal and see the future. His reputation grew, and through a series of introductions in high society, this strange, unkempt peasant with mesmerizing eyes eventually found his way into the most exclusive circle in all of Russia, the imperial court of Tsar Nicholas and Tsarina Alexandra. His entry into this world was made possible by a single, desperate vulnerability: the health of the heir to the throne, Alexei. The young Tsarevich suffered from hemophilia, a genetic disease that prevented his blood from clotting. Even a minor bump or bruise could lead to agonizing pain and internal bleeding that doctors were powerless to stop. The Tsarina, Alexandra, a deeply religious and mystical woman, was desperate for a miracle, and in Rasputin she found one. On several occasions, when Alexei was suffering from a severe bleeding episode and near death, Rasputin was summoned, and after his prayers and strange incantations, the bleeding would stop. Was this a divine miracle? Modern historians suggest it was likely a form of hypnosis, his calm, confident presence soothing the anxious mother and child, which in turn lowered the boy's blood pressure and allowed the bleeding to slow. But for the desperate Tsarina, the explanation was simple. Rasputin was a man of God, a holy savior sent to protect her son. This single miracle gave him an unbreakable hold over the empress, and through her, the entire Russian Empire. But what was the source of this incredible influence? The code lies in his authenticity, or at least the perception of it. In a court filled with rigid etiquette, powdered wigs, and French mannerisms, Rasputin was a raw, unfiltered force of nature. He was a Siberian peasant who spoke directly, looked people straight in the eye, and carried the aura of the Russian soil itself. To the German-born Tsarina, who felt like an outsider and distrusted the scheming aristocracy, Rasputin's simple, powerful faith and commanding presence felt more genuine and divinely inspired than anything she had ever encountered. He wasn't just a healer, he was a spiritual anchor in a sea of courtly deceit. With the Tsarina's absolute trust, Rasputin's influence became immense. He was a constant presence in the palace. He offered advice not just on spiritual matters, but on political and military appointments. Ambitious officials and ministers soon realized that the fastest way to gain favor with the Tsar was to first gain the favor of the Mad Monk. His drunken pronouncements became state policy. Competent ministers were dismissed and replaced by his incompetent cronies. While Russian soldiers were dying by the millions on the battlefields of World War I, the government in St. Petersburg was paralyzed by the whims of a corrupt, debauched mystic. This internal paralysis could not have come at a worse time. By 1916, the war effort was catastrophic. The home front was collapsing. Food and fuel shortages led to bread riots in the cities, and the public's faith in the Tsar who was personally commanding the army at the front, was evaporating. With the Tsar away, the Tsarina and Rasputin were effectively in control of domestic policy. Every political failure, every rumor of incompetence, and every story of starvation was laid at their feet. Rasputin became the focal point for all the anger and frustration of a nation on the brink of implosion. He was no longer just a court mystic. He was the symbol of a rotten and failing regime. His behavior was scandalous. Tales of his drunken orgies and his seduction of high society women were the talk of the capital. He was a living contradiction, a man who preached of God while indulging in every earthly sin. This hypocrisy eroded the last vestiges of respect for the royal family among the common people and the aristocracy alike. For many, Rasputin was not just a charlatan. He was a symptom of the deep sickness and corruption at the heart of the Romanov regime. He was the final, fatal crack in the foundation of a dying empire. By late 1916, a group of conservative nobles, led by the charismatic Prince Felix Yusupov, decided that for the good of Russia, Rasputin had to be eliminated. Their plot to murder him has become the stuff of legend, a testament to the man's almost supernatural reputation. They lured him to Yusupov's palace, where they fed him cakes and wine laced with enough cyanide to kill several men. But the poison seemed to have no effect. In a panic, Yusupov shot him in the chest. Rasputin collapsed, apparently dead. But as the conspirators examined the body, he suddenly leaped up, his eyes filled with fury, and attacked Yusupov before staggering out into the snowy courtyard. The terrified nobles shot him again, multiple times, and bludgeoned him into submission. Still fearing he might rise again, they bound his body and threw it into the icy Never River. When his body was recovered days later, the autopsy found water in his lungs, suggesting that, even after being poisoned, shot multiple times, and beaten, he was still alive when he was thrown into the river. The myth of Rasputin's immortality was complete. The conspirators believed they had saved Russia. They were wrong. The immediate aftermath of Rasputin's death was not relief, but chaos. The Tsarina was plunged into grief and vengeful paranoia. The murder, carried out by aristocrats, shattered the remaining unity of the ruling class. More importantly, by eliminating the scapegoat, the plotters forced the Russian people's anger to focus solely on its final, true target, the Tsar and Tsarina themselves. Instead of cauterizing the wound, the assassination of Rasputin had simply exposed the fatal sickness of the monarchy to the world. The Code of Rasputin is a story of how a single, charismatic individual can exploit the fears and weaknesses of a powerful system. He was a master manipulator, a man who understood that power does not always come from titles or armies, but from finding the one secret, desperate need of those in charge and making himself the only solution. His death came too late to save the monarchy. Just a few months later, the Russian Revolution would erupt, and the Romanov dynasty he had helped to cripple would be swept away forever. His influence did not truly end with his death. In a chilling letter of prophecy written before he was murdered, Rasputin warned the Tsar that if he were killed by nobles, the entire imperial family would be killed by the Russian people within 2 years. Less than 2 years later, Tsar Nicholas, Tsarina Alexandra, and all of their children were executed by revolutionaries in a basement in Ekaterinburg. The Mad Monk's final, terrifying prophecy had come true. He remains a figure of fascination and revulsion, a man whose life was a bizarre mix of piety and sin, of healing and destruction. Was he a holy man, a demon, or simply a clever opportunist who found himself in the right place at the wrong time? the true nature of his power remains one of history's most compelling and unsettling mysteries. He was a force of chaos that the ordered world of the Russian Empire could not comprehend, and in the end, his presence helped to shatter it completely. And that is the architecture of the influence of Grigori Rasputin. Remember, history is more than a story. It's a code, and there is always another layer to decrypt. Subscribe and continue the investigation with us.